Okay, let's try this again and see what it does. Alright, so hey everybody, it's CSEC Panda and I'm going again. This is a little last lap for the 2025 exam. A little late and definitely something that is not entirely planned out really well or what have you. A lot of stuff going on here, but I hope at some point some people will find this. The thing that I want to do is help you understand how you can be ready for the exam tomorrow. Not so much because you are looking at the not so much because you are out here cramming exactly what to say or anything like that, but because you know what they're looking for. So, what I really wanted to talk about today is this section of the syllabus that goes ahead to show you the performance of people in years bygone. So let's just really jump into and look at what they are looking for, and we'll see. Welcome to everybody who has joined. I know this is really strange, and my PC is just acting up and stuff, so I don't even know what's going on with that. But we definitely are gonna keep it going, right? So even if you see this in the future, maybe I'll have to repost it. I'm going for it. What I was saying before is that these are the comments that they had. So in 2020, it was the paper. This was how people did on paper 1, which was basically okay. But I'm more interested in talking about paper 2 because that's what's coming at you tomorrow more in terms of just the whole thing, so we should look at this. So they were saying it's summary, expository writing, and short story in the same way. And then you have this persuasive / argumentative essay. So question 1, they say it's worth 30 marks. I don't know if I remember summaries being as much as that, but they're looking for you to correctly identify the 5 points with which they'll give you 5 marks. That part is always true. And this is the one that was about the aloe vera plant. So the interesting things we need to note here are that the average score for this question, people got on average 10 marks, right? So some people got a lot more, some people got a lot less, but you need to be trying to get more than 10 marks to be quote-unquote above average, right? So at least try and get the 5 main points and at least try and organize them well. Stick to the instructions as much as possible. Try to put in more than just the 5 points, and you genuinely will be on your way to getting full marks with that advice, okay? Alright, so that's the first thing I wanted to bring out here. Try to get more than 10 marks to be above average. Then they were pleased, is what they were saying, with people's ability to actually identify the 5 main points, and then they thought that it was really good that everybody had gotten better at writing in one paragraph, because in years bygone, people were having a lot of trouble with that. I think a lot more people know what to do now, so it's not as bad. However, unfortunately, candidates continue to lift sentences right from the stimulus material, so do not fall victim to the tendency to just copy-paste and take out a sentence from the stimulus and then the paragraphs that they give you, slap that right back without making any changes or condensing it or making it your own. You don't want to do that. Now, all these points, which I believe there are 9 of them, are points that they identified that were totally valid from the actual passage that they gave, right? So all of these were acceptable to include in the summary. And again, what you would have been doing in the end is mostly spicing this up with the vocabulary a little bit more, and then also creating a flow using connecting words and so on, right? So even using all the points that they have here, you could have said, according to them, aloe vera is a pharmacy and a plant, and has various cultural uses in some Caribbean countries. In fact, aloe vera is quite widespread in the Caribbean and is particularly prolific in Aruba. Historically, aloe vera has been a way of life in Aruba, even becoming a first major revenue earner for the island. The booming aloe vera industry in Aruba can be traced back to the 18th century, but since then there has been a decline in the aloe industry, with the land formerly used to plant the crop now used for building purposes, right? And that would have been a summary that was perfectly fine because it literally said what the article said, but shorter. And you can see this used as many as 9 points, right? So the flow of what I just said there wasn't bad, and it was completely true. So here is literally a summary that they thought was good. They're looking for you to write something like this, okay? The aloe vera plant, which has an abundance of nutrients, has many medicinal uses. It grows throughout the Caribbean and has been used to treat a variety of ailments. There are also cultural beliefs and uses associated with it that vary from territory to territory. The aloe vera plant grows prolifically throughout the island of Aruba. In fact, since the 18th century, it became important to the development of Aruba because it was the first major export crop and its products were exported around the world. There has been a decline in the aloe industry recently, however. Land that was formerly used to plant aloes is now used for development. And they would have been perfectly okay with that as a summary. So you just want to bear that in mind as you're doing all that you're doing. That voice and tone and stuff was fine. I know some people like to make their writing sound very fancy, but I don't think that there is too much of a need to do that in summary writing, because it's more so that they're looking to see whether you are able to read and understand the information that was actually contained there. So that's what it's going to matter most, right? That's what you want to focus on. So even though it sounded simple, it was good in their opinion because you could see clearly which points you took out and that you understood the whole jumbled up passage that came from before. Okay, so question 2, which was going to be the expository writing. Remember, this was the Yale 2020. So you may have seen this paper, and that's what's going on though. So candidates were given a scenario, and we were asked to write a notice that year. So there were various responses. Some people were really competent in handling the question, other people just were not. And what this was looking like was that people just wholesale lifted the contents from the original material, and they didn't attempt to use their own style in writing the notice. So for this, people really got like 17 marks on average, which you really want that to be higher, because that's representing like getting half the marks, and that's not great. Okay, so here what we're saying is that a lot of candidates were able to extract the relevant points, but from the scripts that we actually looked at, a lot of people didn't know the format of a notice. I'm not surprised because I don't think they really talk about this a lot. So what people did instead was some of them wrote speeches and some of them wrote letters to the student body. What they were looking for was a notice a little more like this flavor, kind of starting with notice up here and then putting in the details, right? So they were saying they wanted you to start with who, St. Mary's College Council. What is that it will be holding its election when? Friday at 10 a.m. Where? At the school's auditorium. And a little more of the what detail here. At that point, you have some of the marks in the bag, really, because you've covered, again, I'm saying who, what, when, where, right? So now you just have a few more details to fill in. So on the stated date, students will be able to vote for the following vacant positions on the executive, and we have president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, PR officer. Students are encouraged to vote for one candidate for every available position. It is important to note that while you may vote for a student from any form for the other positions, you must vote for a fifth form student for the position of president. And then it's signed John Jacobs, not your real name, President, St. Mary's Students' Council. So fundamentally speaking, this is the format for notice they were looking for, according to them. Again, I think just starting with notice, keeping it brief, and not having like any type of introductory paragraph is a huge part of what you probably want. So I think that a part of this too is going to be taking in their recommendations here, right? So what they're saying is students should be, and this is kind of like written to teachers, so that's going to be its own thing right there. Students should be exposed to all the forms will be examined under question 2, so go into this knowing that it could be a letter or a report or email or notices. And then we really want to learn more about the forms of writing. Honestly, I think the ones that only are confusing people are mostly the it's like notices confuse people, and also like writing a report, because I don't think there ever really was stated, even in the textbooks and stuff, I'm not sure I see a format that they ever mentioned that they actually wanted you to follow. So I'm not surprised that people are kind of confused by that, because it genuinely is confusing. Alright. So for question 3 and 4, they were obviously talking about the story writing question. So here they were looking for you to demonstrate that the content of the story was good, as well as your organization and language usage. And so this separation really allowed markers to award marks for the components while maintaining their understanding of the interrelatedness to the development of the story. So, alright. Here, people got 11 and 12 marks on average, which is like out of 25 or so, so somewhere between half and like less than half. So try to get more than 12 marks. Let's look at how you can do that. Okay, so here's what people got right and what they didn't get too right. So for question 3, people got the picture. And the picture in this year was 2 women looking over a deteriorating veranda or porch. A dog, a cactus plant, one half of the door closed, the other opened. I think everybody remembers this picture, you've seen it in the paper. So what happened here is that people thought that it wasn't necessary for them to use all the elements of the picture in their story. So they used the women as main characters for the most part, and they included some of the elements in the picture. And at least one story, the dog was a narrator, and a few candidates who were better writers used the characters and the setting to construct stories that were intriguing and went beyond mere narration. However, what the weaker candidates did was they made stories that were just very simple narratives with limited effective use of dialogue, atmosphere, setting, and characters. So if you're not very good at story writing, they're going to be looking to see if you were kind of bad at using dialogue, or the setting of the characters weren't really bumped up. and that's not so good. So also they want you, well, they notice that people were doing a lot of telling rather than showing, and that's something that will always make a story a little less engaging because you're just telling me that it happened, that the man was very angry and not that, the man was shaking and his face was red, his teeth were clenched type of thing. That second version of showing always makes a story better. So basically, in the question 4, which is the same thing, this is where we had the prompt about Mr. Matar, and so on. I don't know. I always found this prompt difficult, personally, even in trying to wrestle with it, because I think it says a lot of the story and it kind of boxes you in. So they say the better candidates were able to use the sentences to craft a story that made use of various elements of fiction. However, the lines seemed to have created difficulty for some candidates as their plot development was restricted and their endings were forced. And I think genuinely the problem here, this Mr. Matar one, the prompt was bad. But, so this is what they found. People made abrupt endings and they forced the plot. Additionally, in their stories, some candidates did not adequately make the link between the first and second sentence. Yeah, for example, the stranger's arrival didn't unravel much of why the central character was withdrawn. The inclusion of the stimulus sentences, which that you're supposed to do that, literally put the stimulus sentence in the story, seemed to be forced, and some candidates appeared to have prepared stories to which they attached the stimulus. So some people like that when they go in and they already have a story in their mind that they practice writing, and then they just kind of hope that the prompt will fit no matter what. I don't really recommend that. You can look at my same story writing video and see what I recommend for that, which is basically to separate out the who, what, when, where type of elements from the prompt, and then you can just use that and it does what it's supposed to do. Okay, so in both questions 3 and 4, people basically didn't understand what the prompt was about. And then sometimes people didn't even write a story, but they produced something else. I don't know, like a poem or something maybe, but that's not what we're looking for. Okay, so once again, organization is something you want to look out for. People mostly did okay in that, but they thought it could have been better in some areas. People who scored high on content were also the people who were good at language. So I guess that's just people who are better at story writing because they have more practice, they're more advanced in that. That's the thing there too. But when people weren't too good at having the vocabulary they needed for their stories, people would not really use strong verbs, adjectives, adverbs, figurative language, etc. So they weren't really able to do a lot of showing. They ended up doing a lot of telling in the stories, which gave it a kind of reporting style feel. So that's something you want to look out for. You don't want to do that, right? There's some issues with spelling and subject-verb agreement and stuff, which is grammar. But again, you want to look out and do the best that you can, essentially, because there's that. A few people used dialect in the narration of the stories, which they don't like. They only want you to use dialect if you're going to at all in speech. So if the character is speaking and it's dialect, you put that inside the inverted commas, so you know it's speech and it's not part of the story. Don't do that one. So basically, most people did fairly okay in this. And some people didn't even write the story, they just wrote 1 or 2 lines. So try not to be those people if you can, right? Okay, so for question 5, we were looking at a persuasive essay, as usual. The number of road accidents will decrease if the age of obtaining a driver's license is increased to 20 years. Now, what we're looking at here is that you were supposed to give your view on the given statement. So the actual quality was varying in terms of the responses. Most people understood the question based on the response they provided, and some people actually presented reasonable logical arguments in support of their particular stance. These presented introductions that linked logically to the body of the essay, right? So it made sense. It didn't just feel like they were chopping it up and putting it together, it actually made sense, right? So what we're looking at here is that it was noteworthy that no script was awarded a range 6, which indicated that the candidates demonstrated superiority. So nobody was excellent at this apparently. The average score for this question was 8.16, making it the question which recorded the lowest performance by candidates. People really didn't do well in this one. Alright, a lot of people didn't really develop on the points, and it seemed that some candidates are under the assumption that simply writing a statement is sufficient for developing an argument. So the essays seemed to be simply ideas written as points, and there was no elaboration provided. So if you elaborate a little bit more on your point, that's what they're looking for. Okay? So essentially, you can hear what people do all the time. Don't feel bad if this is something that you do, because it could happen. But at the same time, you don't want to really be out here not knowing the pitfalls and just falling into them. So essentially, as we heard, in your summary, you're looking for using one paragraph with more than 5 points that you've extracted. In your notice, well, not notice, but in the notice, you wanted to get the format like that. Everything else, try to format it so we can tell what it is. In the story, you want to include as many elements as you see and make sure that it has a flow that feels like it's actually a story and not just something else. Don't write anything besides a story, because people who do different genres, they say, I don't know if they did a song or a poem or something, but that's not what you're going for. Okay, and then in the last thing, you want to elaborate on the why of supporting a point, as opposed to just leaving it to, you make the statement that it's there, and then you hope that that'll be a thing. That'll be sufficient. It won't really be. So in 2021, fully a year later, this was the year that the question was about coconut oil, right? So this year they found that people were basically able to understand the passage and they could identify the critical and essential points, but they continued to do this thing of lifting sentences directly from the stimulus and just doing what they do. That's not what you're going for. You don't want to do that necessarily, so that's what's going on, okay? But most people were able to actually understand what was said, and so I just wanted you to be able to see that these are the points that they would have accepted. These are the ones that they saw as being a thing, right? So that's something that you're going to want to bear in mind. Yeah? Okay. So all 8 of these points would have been good, and the level of the summary that they were going for, and this is in the link, the level of the summary they were going for is just, in the Caribbean, the popularity of cooking oil for cooking and other domestic purposes and for export meant that the product was a major source of employment and foreign currency. The situation declined in the 1980s. Studies among people with heart problems claimed that cholesterol was in the oil, is the cause of heart attacks. This view became popular with nutritionists who advocated using corn or vegetable oils, and then Caribbean manufacturers denied the claims and accused foreign manufacturers of trying to enlarge their market. Subsequently, newer scientific evidence supports regional manufacturers. It's expected that a return to the normal use of coconut oil will again provide employment and revenue for Caribbean economies. Okay, I think that last sentence there, just from remembering the question, I think they kind of added that point themselves, but okay. it's nice to know that they would have accepted that as well, apparently. Okay, so Section B was expository writing, and this was an accident report. So what they were looking for, as usual, is that you identify the critical points and to produce writing, continuous prose, in the format that was required for the task. So in this case, it was a report of the given accident. Either the following reports were accepted, either a simple report, a memo, a formal report. To be honest, guys, I've never really seen where they have the format for this listed, so I just have to take them at their word. What they were looking for was how much of the information, which is all these things here, you were able to put in. This question was kind of challenging because there was just a lot of stuff going on, but this is what's up. So we had incompetence and we had superiority. The range was all the way there. In many cases, candidates were able to identify the critical content. Much of the information was accurate in terms of the specifics, but people didn't really produce the format, and they lost 3 marks for format. So that's how many you'd lose if format was off. You also had a lot of run-on sentences, so you want to look out for that. This is kind of what they were expecting you to produce, right? So not too bad. It's almost a letter, but I mean, I think you've made that distinction by saying that it's a report, and also just by having the there's nothing else contained inside here besides just literally a report on what happened. So yeah. Short story. We had some things. This was where the prompt with the boy sitting with his back against the wall with a bag beside him and his head raised looking intently at something. We remember that one. As usual, the people who were better writers, who it mostly wasn't that, used a character and setting to tell stories that were intriguing, and they were good because they went beyond just describing what was happening. But the weaker candidates produced simple stories that were limited, effective use of dialogue, and not much atmosphere, not much setting, not many characters, so that wasn't so hard, right? And the plot of these stories were in the telling rather than showing mode, which is what you don't want to do. People got, on average, 10-ish marks, so you want to try and get more than that if you possibly can. Now, the word prompt was this, where Shireen took a deep breath and looked at the murky water. And apparently people kind of struggle with this because we got a lot of rambling narratives, because we were mostly trying to get Shireen to the water and to give her an opportunity to lower her hand. An unusually high number of stories used the setting of going on a camping trip and then there was water. This resulted in predictable plots and outcomes. However, a very small number of scripts used the line to write excellent stories. These scripts showed that candidates understood how to use the elements of fiction to write stories that were in line with the requirements of the syllabus and marking key. So they got about 13 marks out of 25, so that was okay. People did better with the picture, it would appeal. So what you really want to look for, as they were saying, is that you get some coherence and logic in how you're doing your thing, so that at least it makes sense in terms of that, right? And that's important. So, yeah, you can see basically every year is the same things that repeat. You just really, at the end of the day, want to avoid major mistakes and try to write a reasonably, like a story that feels like beginning, middle, and end. A summary that feels like it's examined the important points of the larger text. Expository writing that feels like it exposes the details of what happened. And persuasive writing that feels like it persuades. Like, at the end of the day, it comes down to being something pretty simple like that. Okay? So, again, people didn't do too well in this section. They only got about 7 marks out of 25 here. So let's see why they thought that was. Even though people were able to respond to this prompt that all candidates must study a foreign language until the end of their secondary education, and they wanted you to write an essay giving your views on this, what happened in reality was that people were able to generate ideas fairly easily. So that wasn't really the problem. But sentence structure was a problem. People didn't seem to understand how to write a full sentence, so try not to do that. Make sure that your sentence has like a subject and then, well, the object. So you want to have a character of some variety that does something, like it connects. You shouldn't be left asking what, or what happened to whom, or it happened to what, or you should have a complete idea and a picture transferred into your mind if the sentence is complete, right? So with the result of this poor sentence structure being that sometimes you had a very long sentence, and they're talking about literally like over 100 words long. So like, that's not what we're going for. Okay, so paragraphing was a bit of an issue. Sometimes people indented, but didn't show an understanding of paragraph development. So this is like if you just really are being super random with how you're doing a paragraph just because you wanted to show that you did it, but not because you were introducing a new idea. And that's not so great. Okay, so also they were saying that there was an issue with topic sentences and supporting sentences. So I guess people basically didn't know how to do an essay, and you can kind of look around on YouTube and there are a lot of things that will help you with that, right? So, I mean, in this case, you're trying to just get more than 7 marks to be better than average, so go for that, right? So, you know, people weren't really able to elaborate. It was just like you put the idea and you drop it there. So don't make that mistake. But as much as that sounds like a lot of ways for this to go wrong, what you want to do in the end is just ensure that you are basically demonstrating that you understand and can work with the things that are listed there, right? So your sentence structure and stuff, that's what you're going for. You're going to end up doing your best tomorrow, and that is enough. What you don't want to do is go in there and do something that is easy to avoid. So what we've just looked at is the commentary from CXE itself, which will end up showing you what is the worst possible thing that you can do, that they always look for, and that's going to be the thing. This was really just the answers rubric, which I think we've all seen a lot more now, and we understand that we will end up getting between this many and this many marks, more or less, depending on the superiority that we can demonstrate in doing stuff. And to be real with you, it's not so much worth actually fighting up with this unless you really are trying to get top marks or something. But really, you just focus in on doing the actual work of writing a good piece, and all of this is going to fall together. You don't have to fuss about this too much, right? So that is really the end of the little run through I wanted to give tonight. I know that this might not reach that many people because the algorithm, I don't know what's going on with that. It's been different with me, but I hope that whoever this information finds, and it really might not be many people because I get it, and I probably should have done this earlier and differently, but I don't know what's going on these days. So I really hope that this helped. If you see this, if you stayed until the end, thanks a lot, and all the best with your exam, okay? You've got this. All right, bye-bye.